Good morning, Year 11. I hope you're well and having a lovely day. Please could you write the date and the title, Structuring an Argument. For your do now, I'd like you to answer these two questions. 1. What is a signpost sentence and how is it beneficial? And number 2. How was the theme or secrecy presented in this extract? Write a signpost sentence answering this question. Pause the video for a couple of minutes to do this now. So as you may recall, a signpost sentence is a sentence that uses the words of the question to introduce a key idea or topic. It points back towards the question and down towards the upcoming paragraph, linking the two. Secrecy is presented in the extract through the use of. So you're just rearranging the words of the question to make it really clear that you're linking back to the question and you're using the words of the question to introduce the idea or theme that will underlie your paragraph. So please do make sure that you've noted this down. Please figure out the date and title. The title is Structuring an Argument. The work you'll complete in this lesson will help you improve your critical style when you have to build an argument in your essays. It will also help you in terms of structure generally. Whenever you do a piece of writing, be it an essay, an application form, a personal statement, even drafting a formal email, ideally you want to follow some sort of clear structure that will make it clear and accessible to your audience. So what we do today will help provide you with knowledge of how to have a clear, understandable structure. In terms of an argument is an opinion which is supported by a series of connected statements and evidence. It's an attempt to persuade someone of something. So could you copy that down? Okay, so these are some key marker sentences which are really good in terms of consolidating your structure. So please could you copy down at least 4, please, from the first 3 sections and then both 2 of the last section. So please could you copy them down now? Okay, so what I'd like you to do is pick one of the following argument topics. I would like you to write an introduction, 3 signpost sentences, a counter-argument signpost sentence, and a conclusion. You can argue for or against a statement. Alternatively, you can devise your own topic. So these are some ideas that you may want to do. Home learning is better than learning at school. Violent video games should be banned. Greater monitoring is required by social media platforms. College education should be compulsory. Corporal punishment, which is physical punishment, should be reintroduced in schools. Children should be allowed to transition at whatever age they choose. And antidepressants should only be prescribed after a course of therapy. So these are just some ideas I had. You can pick any topic that you would like. And I've also got an example for you. So I've made up my own topic. I'm arguing in favour of the statement, more should be done to preserve the welfare of local foxes, which is something I feel very passionately about. And so I'll go through what I've done. So introduction, keep it brief. If you were doing a speech, then the introduction will be longer than this, but for this purpose, you can just have a couple of sentences. Over the past 16 years, the fox population has fallen at an alarming rate, dropping by 41% since 1995. How have we allowed this to happen? And, more importantly, what can we do to halt it? So you can see I've used emotive language with the word alarming. I've used statistics with 41%. I've used a rhetorical question, how have we allowed this to happen? And then another rhetorical question, what can we do to halt it? I've also used the pronoun we to make it inclusive. So let's look at the first signpost sentence I've used. One reason that more should be done to preserve the welfare of local foxes, so that's the bit that links to the question, is because foxes play a key role in controlling the populations of their prey. So we've had the first bit, which links back to the question, and now this is telling us what we're going to be talking about in this paragraph. Talking about how they control the populations of their prey, animals such as birds and rats who would otherwise overpopulate. So clearly, in this paragraph, I'll be talking about how humans then would have to deal with overpopulation of rodents like rats, and also there'd be too many birds, which could in turn potentially damage agriculture. And so that's clearly the gist of that particular paragraph, clearly introduced in that topic sentence or signpost sentence. So let's look at the next one. Another reason that more should be done to preserve the welfare of local foxes, so again linking back to this topic, is because urbanisation has had a devastating effect on them. So this paragraph would talk about how the fact that we're destroying local habitats has led to foxes struggling to reproduce, having to be scavengers, and sometimes getting in really distressing situations, getting stuck in places. There's this horrible article about a fox that got his head stuck in a plastic bag and suffocated. And so this is all linked to urbanisation, building works everywhere, deforestation. So it's the driver of this paragraph would be an environmental perspective on the decline in the fox population and the need to preserve them. So let's go on to the third one. The third reason that more should be done to preserve the welfare of local foxes is because we have a moral obligation to protect them. So we've talked about overpopulation, and so the first paragraph is quite pragmatic or practical. It's talking about how they're useful to us, so almost self-serving. Then the second one is talking about urbanization, so an environmental perspective, and the third one is quite distinct because it's a moral perspective. So in this paragraph, I would talk about how we should be stewards, and we have an ethical role to play because we have the most power. We should be guardians of the environment and the creatures because with great power comes great responsibility. So that's what I would talk about in that particular paragraph. And then for the counter argument, many people believe that we should not preserve the welfare of foxes. So again, linking back, as they pose a threat to domestic animals. However, this is not the case because, so in this counter argument, I would expose that myth as false because I too, initially when I was younger, believed that foxes would go after cats, but actually, a cat, the average cat, is the same size as a fox, and foxes are generally very scared of cats. I often saw Leo chasing away foxes that were twice his size. So foxes, urban foxes at least, have a great fear of humans, but also typically of pets, even if those pets are smaller than them. I've always wondered why that is. Perhaps it's because they smell of humans, because the foxes see them going into houses. I'm not entirely sure, but it is a myth that foxes would eat animals and pets. And maybe there's very rare cases. And even if it was the case that they were going after pets, preserving them and looking after them and making sure they have alternative food sources would decrease this. So it's whatever way you look at it, it's still worth helping the foxes. So that would be my counter argument. And then finally, a conclusion. Therefore, it's apparent that there are a plethora of potent reasons why we need to take action at once to preserve this valuable and vulnerable animal. So we've got plethora of potent, alliteration, also preserve, and then valuable and vulnerable, alliteration again. And you've also got we need to. So you've got an imperative verb there, a command, we need to. So that is my structure. Could you please do this? So we're going back to your task now. Please can you do what I've done for your own topic? You can pick one from the slide or you can come up with your own. So pause the video for about 10 to 15 minutes to do that now. Okay, so we're now going to consider how you could use these or similar signposts in an English literature essay. Bear in mind, you need to use critical style to get a 6+ in English literature. So the discursive essay for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde might look something like this. Mr. Hyde's sole purpose is to explore man's capacity for evil. How far do you agree with this statement? Explore at least 2 moments from the novel to support your ideas. So the first step is annotating the question. So please do copy this question into your book and highlight or underline keywords and annotate it in a manner that will help you structure your answer. Pause the video to do this now. Okay, so Hyde's sole purpose. So you'd consider there, does he have another role? Is one of his purposes exploring man's capacity for evil, and another purpose is to show something else? So you may consider maybe his other roles involve demonstrating secrecy and the need for secrecy, or representing the supernatural. So you could also add into your annotations, maybe draw a line from does he have another role and write secrecy, supernatural, mysticism, religion, things like that. Is to explore man's capacity for evil. So here you think about how does he represent mankind. Capacity for something is ability for something, how much something can be achieved. And then evil, think about what evil he commits. How far do you agree? So you need a measurement. Do you agree to a significant? I would never fully agree or disagree. You should have some aspect of measurement. You can greatly agree. You can agree to a very limited extent, but I would strongly suggest that you never fully agree or disagree, because that will show a quite narrow-minded approach. And the statements they'll give you generally will have scope for agreement and disagreement. So even if you very strongly go one way or the other, always do show some appreciation of the opposing side. So you need to explore at least 2 moments. So you'd highlight that and then probably write which 2 moments you would use. So pause the video to jot down the notes on the slide. Okay, so step 2. So we've done step 1, which is annotating the question. We're now on to step 2, which is generating ideas and ordering your points. So I would start by talking about the trampling of the young girl to agree with the statement. So it shows that we are demonstrating how he represents man's capacity for evil by exploring key moment 1. He trampled calmly over the young girl's body. You should all know that quote by now, talking about the oxymoron, how it reveals his sinister, evil nature. So you could explore that moment to agree with the statement. And then instead of flip-flopping between agree, disagree, I think it's much stronger if you go with your main position and then have your counter argument, or if you're balancing, go for 2 agree, first start with agree, then disagree. So then I would go on to point 2, which is my other agree point, and I would talk about the murder of Carew as the apotheosis, which means climax of his evil, which is key moment 3. So I've now agreed with the statement. I'm now going to move on to disagree. So my third point would be Mr. Hyde is also used to explore man's conflicted nature, as can be seen through the incident of the window, key moment 5. So as you may remember, the window was instantly thrust down. Do make sure, by the way, you're getting these quotes accurate. Someone wrote, the window was very quickly shut. None of the words were correct. So if you make a slight slip, they may give it to you, but something like very quickly shut wouldn't really get you any marks for the quote because it's too far removed from what the actual quote is. So do make sure you're getting those quotes accurate. And so here we're talking about conflict. If he was purely evil, there would be no sense of conflict. So his part of Mr. Hyde's purpose is to show the divergence between Dr. Jekyll, who has the good in him, and Mr. Hyde, who has evil. So part of the reason Hyde exists, yes, is to show evil, but also to act as a counterpart to Dr. Jekyll and reveal aspects of his character too. And then I'm going to go to point 4, which is also disagreeing. And then this is also consolidating the other point. Mr. Hyde provides a contrast with Dr. Jekyll, who does have the desire to do good, a desire which he retains right until the end of his life. So here I would talk about key moment 6. So you may recall at the end, after they've broken the door down, they explore the rooms, and then they find near the back door a broken key. And so that's where Dr. Jekyll has stamped on the key to trap Mr. Hyde and prevent him from escaping. Because bear in mind, Mr. Hyde values his own life in an animalistic way more than anything else. So, Dr. Jekyll, even though he does value his life, his morality and his ethics trump his kind of basic desire to live, and he's more kind of profound than that. So, you've got that dichotomy between Mr. Hyde's animalistic desire to live and his narcissistic worldview, and Dr. Jekyll's more selfless, altruistic perspective, and his willingness to die, provided that he can prevent Hyde being unleashed on unsuspecting humanity. So, there I would talk about how this also demonstrates that Mr. Hyde's purpose, and by purpose I mean Stevenson's purpose for having Mr. Hyde exist. So, how part of his purpose is to demonstrate man's greatness in a way, or not greatness, but to demonstrate man's ability or capacity for good, and how it can almost be regarded as optimistic, you could say, because it'd be so easy for Dr. Jekyll, who's been worn away throughout the novel, to give up entirely and just let Mr. Hyde loose. But he doesn't. He let him go too far with the murder of Carew, and after that he kept on fighting right to the bitter end. So, in a respect, even though it is quite bleak at the ending, you could also say it's hopeful too. And Mr. Hyde reveals that good will triumph in the end. You could say that if you wanted. So that would talk about how part of Mr. Hyde's purpose is to explore man's capacity for good along with evil. You could also talk about, in addition to duality, those are my points. You could talk about how Mr. Hyde represents secrecy. You could talk about how he represents supernatural. So think about those quotes we see throughout the novella. Brought out the sweat on me like running, wild as harpies, the hair stood up on me like quills. So continuous quotes throughout telling us about the supernatural effect he has on people, and then also how he links to secrecy. So you could do 3 and 2, 2 and 2. The key thing, if you do the discursive, or regardless of whatever question you do, make sure you have at least, I would say, 3 moments in total. So if you were doing the extract question, you would have the extract and then 2 other moments. If you were doing discursive, it says at least 2 moments. I would really try and make sure you have 3 moments. So pause the video. You can either copy down what I've done, or you can do your own 4 points. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is write your introduction in full, your 4 signpost sentences, and your conclusion in full. So you can use the points I had on the previous slide to do your signpost sentences, or you could use your own points. So remember, introduction in full, conclusion in full. For the 4 signpost sentences, you just need the introduction at the start of the sentence. So your introduction would start, I agree with the statement that, then you write the statement. Make sure you put how much you agree, to a certain or considerable extent, as, and then you briefly outline your reasons for your position. So something we'll talk about more on Friday in the session I really hope you come to, and I really hope I get up in time for, is how a lot of you didn't have an introduction. And an introduction is a really good way. When I see an introduction, I have a really good feeling that it's going to be a 7, 8, or 9. I don't obviously just assume that, but it's a really good indicator. And most of the answers I read wouldn't get into those higher grades. And so always try and have an introduction and conclusion. It only needs to be a line, but it really tightens your argument. Remember to link back to the question at the start of every paragraph. Then after that, I would like you to pick one key moment, listed in the grid and write down the quotations you could use. Then after you've done that, please check your quotations are correct. Remember, you can't paraphrase. If you slip on one word, that's fine, you probably will get the mark. Though or the credit for that, if you entirely paraphrase it and you're just guessing, you wouldn't really get the credit for that at all. So pause the video please to do that now. So can you now complete the same steps for this question? Stevenson uses setting to evoke or create a mood of dread. How far do you agree with this view? Explore at least 2 moments in detail. So first you're going to annotate the question, writing it out, underlining or highlighting key words, and making notes around it. Next step, you're going to generate ideas and order your points to form an argument. I would recommend doing what I did, having your grid with agree and disagree, and then writing your points. Agree is definitely easier than disagree because you can talk about the house as a microcosm of duality, Jekyll's house. You can talk about how a lot of the scenes take place at night. Think back to the lesson when we talked about how in the Gothic genre, many stories are set at night due to the associations or connotations with werewolves, sinister deeds taking place. You can talk about pathetic fallacy, how there's constant references to fog. There's a very sinister reference where the fog lay inside the houses, so indicative of how that sense of mystery, epitomised by the fog, has gone from being outside, where it's was often seen in London. You often had fog and smog due to the industrialised city, and then it's kind of crept inside. So a shift from natural to supernatural through that quote. So quite a lot you could say, and you do ideally need at least 1 point on the opposite side, and I'm going to leave that to you. I'm very interested to see what you come up with, how the setting doesn't create a mood of dread. There's 1 point I could think of, but I'm not going to tell you because I want to see what you come up with. So after you've generated your ideas, I would like you to write the introduction, 4 signpost sentences, and a conclusion. So pause the video please for about 10 minutes to do this now. Right, so before I end, one final point. Today's lesson is probably one of the most important lessons of the entire 2 years. It's unfortunate it falls during lockdown, but it's so important not just for English, for everything you do. Knowing how to structure a piece of writing, be it an English essay, an email, a cover letter when you're applying for a job, is the most important thing. If you have an unstructured, shambolic piece of writing, no one's going to read it because they're not going to understand it. It has no clear direction, no structure. So that's why I'm going to be only marking it, the work you submit today, as submitted if you've done every single task. If you've missed out any tasks, I'm going to mark it as not submitted, okay? So please do make sure you've done every single task in today's lesson. Not pick and mix, like I've said before, you've really got to do each task. And please do spend the full hour on each lesson. There are some pieces of work which I have reluctantly marked as submitted, but they do look like they've been done in about 10 minutes. So do please make sure you are putting the effort in, because on your return to school there will be exams, including a Jekyll and Hyde exam, and I'd be really sad. You've done so well on your mocks, I'm so proud of you. I would really hate for you to go down in your marks. That would be really sad because you haven't put the work in during lockdown. So please do make sure you're doing every activity, you're spending the full hour on not just English, each lesson you do, so then you're fully prepared when you go back to do these exams and to get your best possible mark. Okay, so thank you very, very much. I look forward to reading what you upload, and I shall speak to you. So our next time I'll speak to you will be the live lesson on Friday at the atrocious time of 9:20 in the morning. So please do set multiple alarms if you are someone who struggles to get out of bed, and I will speak to you then. Have a lovely rest of your day.